Welcome here again. I'm Daniel Fehr-Krahn, and let's jump right into it. I know you didn't come here to hear much about me or my background, but to get a hold of get a better understanding of your guys' money. Let me jump in and share. And I appreciate that some of you guys got your camera on and I can see you and help you out. 1 second, let me just adjust here. And we're going to talk about preserving your wealth and your estate. And the way we got to here already was the first workshop is about keeping some of your money. So, learning basic finances, learning, hey, what does planning look like, and getting an overview. And then the second workshop is using some of that money you keep to pay off your debt and put yourself in a good financial position with debt roll up and budgeting and managing your expenses. Our third workshop is about protecting your income and really, using an insurance company's reserve to offset some uncontrollable or unforeseeable risks. Our fourth workshop about how a little bit about the stock market and the stock markets, how they work, how to get access to them and lower your risk. Workshop number 5 is about retirement and tax. And now, if you did it all right, how do we get this stuff to the next generation? And I think that estate planning is something that's not talked about in the middle class. It's not talked about among poor people because they typically when poor people pass away, the family becomes poorer. But when wealthy people pass away, the family becomes wealthier. And that's the main definition. Now, this says we do everything we can to make sure our information is up to date, accurate, and current. Our goal is to help 30 million families go through our education by 2030. And we're committed to it. We will do it with or without, some of me or so you, we're going to do it anyways. And so we're expanding and we're always looking for good people. If you like what you see, maybe someone who brought you out here and they can talk to you about working with us as well. And every day we're flooded with information. Many offer financial advice, but are unlicensed or without industry experience. I would never go to a dentist who's not licensed and has no experience. Even if you go to a hairdresser unlicensed, I don't know if they cut your ear off or what that looks like. But in finance isn't trial and error. It's not, I'll try this for a decade. It doesn't work. I'll try something else for a decade. We want to work with people who have some little bit of experience, hopefully, or someone who's training them does. And we want to do a very holistic approach, which means every time you spend money on one thing, you can't spend money on something else. And so we divide your priorities really into 4 categories. We call it a financial foundation, where the more you invest, the less money you have to pay off debt. Or the more insurance you buy, the less money you have in cash, right? And we think they're all important, and we think you can be your own money manager. Gone are the days you have to always ask someone for advice. Can I do this? Can I do that? We're not children, we're adults. And so we gotta manage our money like adults. And we're gonna look at preserving your wealth. What we're gonna learn is steps you can begin to preserve your hard work. If I work hard, I want that to last. And I want to learn how to transfer and preserve my wealth that I'm building. I want to ensure that my last wishes are prepared and carried out. And so that's what I'm going to learn. And everything has a story. In our workbook, we're going to go through a financial foundation right away. But when it comes to money or caring for elders, loved ones, going to a funeral, or some have to put their career on hold. We've seen estate planning go well. We've seen it go poorly. And, when someone passes away, usually people are at a loss. They don't know what happened. They don't know what to do. And so if I talk to people about estate planning, it doesn't come across very well. But if I talk to people about, hey, what happens when people pass away? What do we do about that? And using normal language, I hope you live a long life, but the truth is, not everybody here will live a long life. That's the reality, I think, and we know that. We got about a dozen of us. But some of the questions of who do I leave my legacy to? Do I leave it to my children, my spouse, grandchildren, possibly in the future? And can I protect my money? How will I be remembered? I think one of the most important things is you can tell the difference between someone who purchases life insurance and someone who buys it, someone who gets sold it. So some people will buy policies and will get sold it. And someone who buys a policy, they usually want to transfer money and values to their children. But if someone who gets sold it, they just think about the money, but they're not planning on, and we know what kind of values are my kids going to have. And if I don't transfer values to my children, the money I give them will corrupt them. And so we talk about a financial foundation, and all four of these could go to my children. My proper protection could go to my wife or my kids, or my debt. If it's not structured well, it could go to my family, or my cash in my bank account could, or my investments. And so I want to know, if I build something, will it last? And I want to look at protecting my legacy and the longevity of my wealth. So wealth has three phases. I'm in phase number one right now, the accumulation phase. I'm building it. Then we have a distribution phase where you're living on your money. The longer the accumulation phase and the shorter the distribution phase, the bigger the estate transfer. If you retire for 40 years and work for 20, maybe there's nothing left. But we want to look at the best strategy for all three. In our industry, many times we talk to people in the accumulation phase, and we want to help them become, financially independent. But how many people have a will or a trust? We talk to people, most people don't have. And a lot of people have someone they don't know where the documents are. Last year, I had a couple of clients pass away, and one of them said, I did a will with them, so I know they did it. And they said, we can't find it. And I said, well, it's got to be in the house. People don't take the will out of the house. It's got to be here. And so what we suggested is get another family, a couple that bring them into your house and get them to look for it and get them to search your house. Because if I put something, so what happened was there was a bookshelf, they put it on top of the bookshelf because they're like, I'll put this away later. And the family friend came and found the will. It was on top of the bookshelf. And I thought to myself, my will is on top of my bookshelf. I thought my wife would never find that thing either, and I told my wife, there's a stack of documents on top of the bookshelf. It's not in the way. But, and then the last thing is, who would know what needs to be done? If you yourself or loved one pass away, we call that person the executor. And we have some training on that kind of stuff. And no matter the size of your estate, its transfer is of paramount importance. Nobody wants to lose money. And so if someone's estate is maybe worth 10,000, I want all 10,000 to go to who you want it to go. If it's 100,000 or a million or above that, we want it to go to the right people. And so the way we make that happen is you protect yourself. You put the right documents in place, you communicate it. And we're going to talk a little bit what that looks like. But in February 2021, they said 57% of Canadians don't have a will. And I just actually talked to someone yesterday, a good friend of mine. He says, hey, I bought a policy about 5 years ago. I think it's rock solid. I can't change it now because he's 5 years in. And but I don't have a will. And then a coworker said, I don't have a will either. I said, let's get together. And if you don't know what to talk about, if you're campaigning with us, talk about a will. And most people don't have one. If they do have one, probably not updated. And it's something that could be updated. Without a will, it's a big headache. So estate planning is the process of determining the distribution of your assets upon your death. It also covers the management of your personal affairs. And so what happens if you don't have a will? What happens is nobody knows what you wanted, and it goes by what the government wanted. And so that might not be the right way, but what a lot of people do is the government built a program called the RRSP program. And the RRSP program says you don't pay any tax now, but when you get old, you pay less tax. That's what they told us, if taxes are lower. But if you pass away, it's all taxable if you have no spouse. And so all of a sudden you think, wait a minute, imagine this. Someone starts when they're young, they do everything right on the investment side, but they don't plan on the tax side, right? They put the money away, they save 10, 20, 30% of their income. They got $1 million in registered accounts. They don't buy any insurance. If you pass away with $1 million and there's no spouse, $500,000 could end up going to the government. If there's two kids, then maybe they get $250,000 each. It might take them a lifetime to get that back to $1 million. And then the government takes a chunk of gain. And so one of the two biggest killers of wealth are taxes. And the second one is consumption. That most wealth is either taxed or consumed. And maybe something in the market, but usually the market goes up long term, but consumption goes up too. And so we want to make the call. You want to call the shot on how your investments get taxed worst case scenario. And if you don't have a plan, the government has one for you. You might not like it. And typically in Manitoba, where I'm from, the first 50,000 goes to the spouse. Then the rest gets divided between the current spouse and the children. And if you have a family where you've had more than one spouse or kids from different spouses, it can get very confusing. But what we want to do is, I think every adult should have a will. Now, if you're following along in our workbook, we look at the idea of saving some money, and drafting a will is one of the first legal documents we should put together. Avoid the probate process. You could consider a trust. What a trust is, basically a will, let me go back. A will decides who your executor is, who manages your stuff, who your beneficiaries are, and who the guardian of your children is. Without a will, the government chooses the guardian of your children, and they pre-decide who gets your stuff. And your family and friends have to go to court to apply to become an executor, or what's called an administrator. Probate is where the government protects who gets what, and they just confirm what's happening in your will. Sometimes it costs money on the administration side. So what I can do is I can manage my money from beyond the grave with what's called a trust. A trust has a trustee who I can entrust to manage my money. It's very common with minor children. So with minor children, what we typically do in life insurance is, if I put my wife as my beneficiary, I have a son, and a soon-to-be daughter, but I have a son. If he's the beneficiary, if me and my wife pass away, the life insurance, typically if there's a minor beneficiary, the life insurance company does not pay the minor, they pay the courts. And then the trustee of the minor has to go to courts and go through the right process to get control of the money. They don't have ownership, but they would have control. If I become ill, not just ill, but incapacitated, can't make decisions, I might want a personal directive. Now, a personal directive or a healthcare directive is a powerful document. What it does is it designates someone called a proxy, and the proxy decides what happens with your healthcare if you can't decide. So I can say two things in the personal directive or healthcare directive. Who's my proxy? For me, it's my wife. She can come in, because I don't want my wife and my mother to show up at the hospital and argue. Now, if you got an 18-year-old child, you don't want the 18-year-old child's significant other to show up and the mom show up. Typically, the mom wants to make the decision, but at a certain point, it's the spouse. So I designate who makes those decisions, life and death decisions on my behalf, or long-term care decisions, whatever, pulling the plug or treatment choices. But sometimes a healthcare directive can be a scary thing if people want to be too responsible too young, because a hospital will typically follow it. So if a 90-year-old grandparent says, I don't want to be resuscitated, and they have cancer and they get the flu, they won't be resuscitated because they're 90, they wrote it down, this is my wishes. They don't usually interpret it very much. If a 30-year-old says, hey, if I'm terminally ill, I don't want to be resuscitated, and they put this document and they put it in force, what happens is, let's say I'm terminally ill, but I also get the flu. Well, they might not treat me. So I got to be careful of what I put in this document to say, maybe I want treatment when I'm young, but I don't want it when I'm old. And sometimes I see these are very strong worded, but they don't leave much room to interpret. And the last document is a power of attorney. This is whether you're still living, not healthcare decisions, but financial decisions. So we want a financial portfolio, but we also want a legal portfolio. The legal portfolio would consider a will. Many trusts are created because of the will. So they're in there as a trustee, or because of life insurance. You want a personal health care directive if you're old enough. But many times when you do a personal health care directive, we can, instead of saying do this, do this, do this in these scenarios, we can just say my wife is my trustee or my proxy. She'll decide. So I don't like pigeonhole her and pin her down to a poor decision. But things like guardianship, travel consents, these are part of the legal portfolio. Your beneficiaries at work. Recently had a family pass away, and the guy's married 10 years. He's at the same job for 15 years. And when he passed away, his beneficiary was the girlfriend he had when he got the job, not his current wife and kids. And so the work stuff goes to the wrong person. But and then staying organized. I think that makes a difference. But without the right documents, if you have children and then remarry, the assets go to your current spouse. But the current spouse doesn't typically have an obligation to take care of your biological children. This is basically every Disney movie when you have a step parent. And the step parent doesn't love the kids as much as the biological parent. Now, if you leave your assets to your child and they're minor, a court will appoint a guardian. They'll take care of them and the assets if you don't appoint one. And you can choose who gets what and who's the most responsible. If you travel, you have documents in place to come back to Canada. If, hey, we get separated, I can't take my son and just go border to border to border without my wife's approval. But some of the things is just peace of mind. Sitting down and saying, we got to get our our legal portfolio in place. And the cost of not having this stuff in place is your time, your money, your sanity. The next generation maybe has to go to court. And what happens is, in a disagreement when it comes to an estate, what happens is, if there's a disagreement, there's one of those few disagreements that never gets forgotten. They say, when this person died, my sibling was cold, I hate them. And they never forgive. And so we got to be very careful. We can communicate and say, hey, this is what's going to go on. And in Canada, or Manitoba anyways, if you challenge a will and you lose, you're removed from it. But if you're not in the will, there's no risk. So many times if there's going to be a challenging and you have like 5 kids and you want to maybe get rid of one, maybe give them a little bit. So there's a risk if he challenges it. But we're going to look at some strategies when it looks at transferring wealth to the ones we love. One is it's called a segregated fund, and what that looks like. Then we're going to talk about the difference between a LIRA, a locked-in retirement account, and a pension. And then different programs like a whole life insurance plan or a universal life insurance plan. And but a segregated fund, a lot of times we just call them seg funds. What they are is an insurance company. Basically, if I back it up, there's 3 financial institutions that have lasted the test of time. One is banks, we call them the vault, or insurance companies, we call them the reserve. They have cash. Banks don't have cash. They just have a vault to keep your money safe. I don't know if there's anything in it, but they have a vault. The insurance company has a reserve, and the investment firm has smart people. And so maybe you don't believe in smart people. You want their reserve. And so the insurance companies say, you can put your money in our reserve, segregate it over here. We'll put our money in the market, and your money will track the market. And what we'll do is we'll guarantee you, we call it a principal guarantee. If you stay with us for 15 years or more, you get 100% of your money back. Or if you want a little bit less fees, maybe 75% of your money back. But a lot of people, they're afraid to lose money. So what this does is it aligns the interests of the insurance company with the interests of the investor. Because if their investments suck, the insurance company loses money. But if the investments go up, the investor wins. So then we say, okay, if the investment choices, a lot of times in a seg fund, you have less choices because the insurance company says, we're not going to give you every choice. We're going to vet them and give you many choices. But I like the alignment of interests. There's a death benefit guarantee that says if you pass away in a recession and the market's down, we'll top you up. There's potential creditor protection. In a corporation, you want to have creditor protection where you want to put the corporation as the beneficiary. Otherwise, there's tax implications if someone passes away and their money leaves. But it can go directly to the beneficiary without probate. It goes right away. You don't have to, if it's non-registered, it's a big headache to have non-registered money go through the courts. So as people age, non-registered money looks good in a segregated fund. By the way, one of the big advantages of a segregated fund that we don't talk about too much is that in the investment world in Canada, there's about 20 major investment manufacturers. Everything from Fidelity to Mackenzie to CI to TD, RBC, big players that manufacture investments, about 20 big ones. On the mutual fund side, if I use one, it's one piece of paper. Two pieces of paper, three piece. So if I build a portfolio with a client and we use 4 different investment manufacturers, it's a lot of paperwork. But on the segregated fund side, I can go to a segregated fund. I can use a little bit of TD, a little bit of Mackenzie, a little bit of Fidelity, a little bit of Equitable, a little bit of this, one account, and they can make changes from manufacturer to manufacturer without any exit or entrance fees. And so the ability to do multiple mandates in one trade ticket makes it a lot easier on the advisor, and have not just diversification and investment risk source, but also management style. And we like that in seg funds. And hey, if a fund doesn't perform, we can move to another fund, different manufacturer, no fees. And so I like that flexibility of a segregated fund. In a mutual fund, we have to go from one dealer to another dealer. In a LIRA, when we look at a locked-in retirement account or a pension. So when you retire or you leave your job, you could keep your pension at your company. Just collect it when you get to retirement age. It's called a deferred pension. Or you can transfer it to a personal account that you can choose how it's managed. And the option is usually only available if you're under 55 at the time of transfer. So a lot of people during COVID got switched careers. Anytime when someone switches careers, we say, hey, when you switch careers, did you move your money from that previous company over to a personal account? And it's a very non-combative way to ask, do you have pension money? Do you have LIRA money? And they can move it to a personal account. A locked-in retirement account looks like an RRSP. It's designed to accumulate money, and you can choose how it's invested. You can choose what manufacturer, but in a pension, the way it looks is if someone passes away with a pension, typically my spouse will get 60% of my income. But if I'm in a LIRA and I pass away, then my spouse usually gets 100% of my income. And so the question is always, what's better for me? Sometimes I feel a pension is better because I have a guaranteed income. What's better for my spouse? Maybe the lump sum. Maybe depending on my kids. It's a different situation. But we want to know not just what's best for me, but what's best for my entire family. When we look at building assets, getting a good career, a lot of times the two things that I think define how well you do financially is your spending habits, number one. And number two, almost more important, is your career you choose. If I want to go work in retail, I can't make much money. So it doesn't matter how much you budget if you have no money to budget. But you get a big income, you learn how to manage that, makes a big difference. But we're going to look at what's called the universal life strategy, where nobody buys a strategy. What they do is they understand the strategy and then they stick products into it. And so you might be able to use your life insurance policy to build and transfer wealth. And there's an old saying of people should buy term and invest the difference, and as soon as they have money, cancel their term. The problem is, as soon as you have money, you want the insurance, and when you don't have money, you need it. When you have it, you want it. And so a universal life can give you tax deferred growth, and it can stay tax deferred until you cancel the policy. So if you wait until you claim, there's typically no taxes. But if you cancel it, it could trigger some tax. You could borrow up to 90% of the cash value without paying tax. And depending on where you go and how you borrow it, some is 50, some is 90, depending if it's invested in equity or if it's in guaranteed stuff. You can go directly to the beneficiaries, tax-free, and it's an immediate increase in value of the estate with insurance protection. Typically, people who say buy term, invest the difference, their goal in life is to spend every dollar they ever make. Because they say buy term, invest the difference. When you get old, spend all your money and die broke. But I don't plan on dying broke. I plan on maybe dying after spending some money. But here's an example. And we'll talk about the need after I show you the example a little bit. But at age 50, someone has 500,000 of non-registered assets. So non-registered assets, it's taxable. So there's a risk to that. If it grows at an average of 6%, that's an assumption, and we're going to assume that on both sides. So it's going to grow by about 30,000 a year. Now, one of the downsides of any kind of insurance plan is it's very difficult to put lump sums into insurance. The insurance companies love steady income. So if that's what they love, that's what we have to give them. So if we continue in the market, it grows to 1.6 million in 20 years. And you can make changes anytime, as long as the market's up. It's typically taxable if you pass away. And so that creates a big headache. It's subject to market risk. The universal life is as well. And it could be caught up in your estate if it's non-registered and non-segregated funded. The universal life strategy let's say in 20 years, you still have your original capital because you just put the interest into a policy. The policy is worth 2 million, just under 2 million. And there's a bunch of cash in there that there is a lot of liquidity later on as well. You get a tax-free death benefit. You bypass the probate, and it's potential creditor protection. And we say potential because sometimes if you put it in, all the money you put in the last 12 months isn't creditor protected, or if the wrong beneficiaries are listed, it's also not creditor protected. And so it depends on the beneficiary to get the creditor protection. Here's what a policy looks like. Now, let's just go through each column. So we say, I know how to read a universal life policy. Coverage year, it's 1 till however long you last. Insured age, this person starts at age 50 and goes down till age 100. Now, we always got to watch the first 10 years, it's every 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to 10. Then it goes every 5 years. And so then we say, okay, we're skipping every 4 years to fit it on one page. There's an assumed primary rate of return and a total rate of return that includes a bonus. The question is always, we don't know what the rate of return is going to be. It's going to be different than we assume, but we want to know, are we assuming a reasonable rate? And then annual plan premium is 30,000 times 20 years. So it's a total of 600,000 is going to go into the program. Now in a universal life, there's 2 accounts. There's the charges. So the first year there's $2,500 in charges, and the fund value is $28,000. There's some fees if you were to exit your first year. If someone plans on exiting, they shouldn't buy this. But their total death benefit is $1 million. Now, there's people on the radio, there's people that say you don't get your death benefit and your cash value. It all depends how you set up the contract. So whatever you want, if it's in the contract, you get it. You can typically put anything you want in the contract. So here, for example, the fund value is $28,000 and the life insurance is $1 million. Now, if you pass away, the death benefit is $1,028,000. So you get the cash and the death benefit. If you look at year 6, the cash value is $192,000, and they put in $180,000. So now the death benefit is $1,192,000. If you look at in year 20, the cash value is $900,000. They've put in $600,000. So you get both your life insurance and the $1 million, or you get $1 million life insurance and the $900,000 in your cash value. So you get both your cash value and your death benefit. The way this one is set up, and we call that fund value plus death benefit. And so it's a way we look at estate planning. If people want their cash value, of course they get it. If they don't want the cash value, you could structure a little different. Maybe it's a little cheaper, but then you lose out on the cash value to save on some insurance costs. And if you need living benefit, it comes out tax-free as well. Or if you get some kind of a major critical illness and qualify for that. But here, you basically pay for 2 things, cash value and life insurance. And life insurance, the annual charges continues to grow up. So because you're not offsetting it, it goes up. In the first 20 years, you're adding lots of fund value. But then after 20 years, your investment income is going to pay those costs. So there is some risk of outliving it. But here it shows illustrated till age 100. If that return is solid, this is what you get. And so one of the things is a lot of people downplay permanent life insurance before looking at the numbers. It's not the name of the policy, but the structure of the policy. It's not whether it's permanent or term. Most permanent is term, and most people who buy term think it's permanent. They don't know the difference. But when we look at a need, if someone says, I have $500,000, I'd love to give that to my kids. Maybe we shouldn't buy stocks with it. Maybe we should buy insurance with it, if that's what their purpose is. Or we look at a whole life strategy where there's no market risk, slightly less liquidity but less market risk. And we can look at different things. When I look at a need for permanent insurance, the need for term is easy. You go through DIME, how much debt you have, income times 10 or 20 or 30, depending how young you are, your mortgage and your estate or kids' education. But when we look at how much I'm going to leave my family, one of the questions is, how much should I leave my family? Where as a man, my wife on average will outlive me by 5 years. And 4 out of 5 women will be widows who are married, and 1 out of 5 men will be widowers. And so there's a good chance my wife will outlive me on average 5 years. That might mean if I buy term insurance, I buy a lot of money because I got kids. But when I get old, maybe I need permanent insurance for maybe 5 years to make sure my wife doesn't go to, maybe I pass away when I'm 85. My wife is 85. I don't want her wearing a red dress, red lipstick to the funeral, looking for another husband. I would like her to maybe be okay financially and not say, hey, we're going to go on I don't know if there's an app for 85-year-olds to do online dating. I don't want her being vulnerable, getting beat up or anything like that. And so I think maybe 5 years is a good thing, but we should also calculate my wife, if she's a stay-at-home wife, she'll inherit my CPP. But if she's also working with me and she maxed out her CPP, I max out mine, she doesn't get mine. So maybe I should look at my CPP. If it's $1,000 a month by 5 years, she's going to lose 60 grand in CPP payments. So maybe I do a $60,000 CPP policy or a $60,000 permanent policy to make sure that the income will drop because she doesn't get my government benefits. I can replace that. Maybe she needs to renovate my home. Maybe she doesn't want to live in the home I died in. So she wants to move to a new home, renovate the home to capture the equity. Got to paint it, fix it up a little bit. So maybe at minimum, maybe 6 months income to have some flexibility because my pension might not transfer to her right away. So she might need some money in the pocket to avoid some abuse. The world can be cruel if you have no money. And so I like to always have money in my pocket. But we look at, is there taxes? Do I have a clear plan? One of the things we sell lots of permanent life insurance to is investors who are in real estate. Because what happens is if they grow a real estate and they have $1 million of real estate and $900,000 in mortgages, there's $100,000 in equity. But if the growth on that is $800,000, that's what you pay tax on. So many times the taxes is more than the equity, and the real estate empire falls apart when someone passes away. That's why government loves real estate, because when people pass away, the taxes are crazy. But we're going to look at, hey, what does it cost to pass away? Number one cost, maybe funeral, between $3,000 and maybe $20,000 for a funeral. A lot of people think, hey, I don't want to spend much money on a funeral, but then when someone passes away, they're going to the nicest gardens, they don't want to. I talked to someone recently, they said I felt guilty for shopping on price for a funeral because I didn't have any money. So I was looking for the cheapest funeral, and they don't want to do that for their spouse. But we have a program called Funeral Concierge where you can get access to it, where someone else will plan that for you, negotiate for you, take care of all that stuff for you. Also companies with some legal documents. If you want to do potluck funeral in your backyard and do a cremation or something like that, or you want to do a full-blown out meal, or it depends how you want to be remembered when it comes to maybe your religious background. I was recently talking to someone, immigrant, and I was explaining what final expense is, what it looks like. He says, in my country, I don't do that. I said, I didn't know his culture very well. But we do a lot of funeral insurance, and it's maybe 10, 20 grand. And it pays out typically right away within 2 days, covers a funeral. In Manitoba law, the funeral has to be satisfied before anything else when it comes to estate planning. So you have to pay that funeral. It's their primary when it comes to probating a will. And when you look at things like, is my will covered? Is my funeral covered? Am I looking at the tax implications if I were to pass away? Or am I saving to make sure maybe if I pass away early, my son could go to school or have some choices with his career? But when you're looking at, you're worried about the future. Are you ready to take care of it? And I think a wealthy person plans for more than one generation. They develop the skill of not just passing money on to their kids, but values as well, where it doesn't matter how much money you pass on. If your children consume, they'll consume all your money. If they produce, they'll produce more money. And so I want to develop a producer mindset in my child. And we say, take action. Here's Ms. Rue says, my youngest son and I were on our way to California for an appointment when he got into a car accident. I had not turned the wheel last second. We would have gone straight over a 20-foot cliff. That gave me the chills, but what's my mind boggling is the thought of relief came to my mind. I knew even if I died at that moment, my family would be okay. I wouldn't have to think how they would survive every day. They'll continue with their life because of proper protection for them. They wouldn't think of the funeral headache. We have our wills in place. I was educated. And the true test of education is, do you have a legal portfolio? Do you have, a financial portfolio? Are you structured well? Maybe you get your faith life in order as well, and throw that into that as well. But one of the greatest miracles is you could change your life. You could learn everything you need to learn within a week or two and get some experience and share with the field. But I think as I talk to people as part of our campaign, I like either starting with the end in mind, say, hey, let's start with this and work backwards. Or I like to start with financial foundation protection, work my way up. But either way, it's a big benefit to the consumer. And I want to be one of the 30 million that's educated, that understands our finances. And we want you to join our campaign, bring someone to workshop and share with us, share what we do with other people. And I think it benefits them. I think the purpose of a company and the purpose of an organization is to make life easier for those involved. And I think what we do is good for the consumer. But if you have any questions, that is our workshop 6. And if this is your last workshop, you can reach out to get a certificate that you've completed all 6 of them. If this is your first workshop, we got workshops every day at Monday through Friday. And I think if you want to campaign with us, master the workshops so you can teach them. Before pandemic, my whole business, I would just go into churches, run workshops. And then I didn't have to talk to too many strangers or anything like that. People would call me. We'd do good work together. And a lot of my teammates I found running workshops as well. So thank you so much for your time, everybody.